911, what's your emergency? 911, what's your emergency?
Be advised, Car 4 has control of the pursuit. Proceed with caution.
Hey everyone, good evening. How are you all doing tonight? Welcome to Behind the Crime Door. We have a great live tonight, you guys. We have Skip, Jansen, and Steve with True Crime Web with us tonight, and we're going to be discussing Delphi and the Richard Allen arrest. It's going to be a great evening. A lot of information, I'm sure. There's been a lot going on with Idaho as well, you guys. Just so you know, I did post a video this afternoon of me reading the probable cause affidavit. So if you get a chance and you haven't read it or heard it in its entirety, you can certainly find the video on my channel. And for everyone who'll be catching my replay, welcome. I really appreciate all of you who tune in and watch the channel, all of your support. Hey, Deb, how are you? Hi, Karen. Hi, Dave. Hey, Pigeon Mac, welcome. Everybody welcome Pigeon Mac. Pigeon Mac is a new moderator on my channel. Hi, Melissa. Hey, Tech Death, how are you? It's good to see you. Hey, Hoosier. How are you? Hey, Maria. What's going on, my dear? Loving your new content. Hey, Carla Ann. Hi, Melissa. Oh, Melissa, I'm so sorry that your dad's having so much trouble. That's awful. I'm sorry to hear that. So, yeah, we're gonna, I've got Skip here with me now, and I'm gonna go ahead and bring him on. Steve will be here as soon as he ends his live stream over on his channel, and then he'll be here with us. So we're all looking forward to that. And I know how that goes, Melissa. It seems like that's just the way life is. It just throws curveballs all the time. Hey, Pigeon. Welcome back, my dear. So everyone say hello to Skip.
Hello.
Hey, Skip. Can
Hey,
you
Kristen.
speak?
How are you?
Can you speak up a bit or turn up your mic?
Yeah, let me turn up my mic.
Thank you.
Is that any better?
Yeah, that's much better. And I turned up my volume, so now we can hear your voice just fine.
Good. Sorry, I'm in the recovery period from COVID, and so
I
I'm trying
know.
not to cough and do all that tonight. So
I'm so sorry. If you have to cough or whatever, you're free to do so.
I've got a bag of cough drops right here, so I'm ready to go.
My subscribers are used to me having asthma issues, so trust me, it won't be a problem.
It's always something, isn't it?
Yeah, always.
It's my second bout with it, so hopefully this will be it.
Yeah, I hope so, for sure, because I've only had it one time and I don't want it anymore.
Yeah,
So,
it's been it's kind of annoying, but there's a couple of days in there that were just really rough. They were. It seems that kind of seems to be the nature of it. That everybody has 2 or 3 really bad days, but it does just kind of seem to hang on. There's sinus issues and all that, so you just don't feel good just in general.
yeah, for sure.
How have you been doing?
Good. I've been doing good. Can you guys hear us okay? You guys tell me if you can. I'm just asking everybody in chat if they can hear us. You
Hey,
guys hear
Pigeon.
us?
Hey, Maria. How are you? So who's Pigeon Mac? Pigeon Mac's new? A new pigeon?
Yeah, Pigeon Mac is one of my new moderators.
Awesome.
Yeah. Oh, good, Pigeon. Thank you for letting us know. Wanted to make sure. Everybody needs.
I'm having the same problem, Pigeon.
Oh, Carla Ann, thank you. Flap, flap. Yep. So,
With my accent and being stuffed up, Pigeon probably won't be able to understand anything.
oh, I don't think you sound too bad. I mean, I can hear it in your voice, but
Yeah. Luckily, I think I'm on the upswing, so
that's good. Especially since you have to work while you have it. It's terrible.
yeah, exactly. I'm looking forward tonight to get to talk to Steve, though.
Oh, I can't tell you how often I am just thrilled to have him on. He's such a great resource and he has so much experience, and to just be able to discuss these cases with him, I just love it. So,
Agreed. He and Perry both. I love.
oh yeah, exactly. I can't say enough about them.
Because
They really,
those guys give you real insight, into what
they do.
Because that's the one thing that everybody gets frustrated with. Everybody gets frustrated with not really knowing what law enforcement's doing, why they're doing this, why they aren't, giving us
Right.
that. And so it is. They have really a lot of insight on that, and
Yeah.
a great source for sure.
Yeah. It's so funny because after all this time and all the stuff that's happened in the Delphi case, I'll tell you in just a second, Melissa. They there's just so many different, I don't know, people that have become kind of high profile that everybody, if you say their name, people know. And Perry's one of them. Steve with True Crime Web is becoming one. I mean, really fast and furious. His channel is growing like crazy, and people realize that everything he's trying to do for these cold cases is amazing. I believe he's taken off next week to come back here to the Midwest for Evansdale. He's really working hard on Evansdale with Drew, and I can't say enough about him. So
yeah, Perry. I know. When those guys, come from an official capacity, and then they get into the true crime genre, and it's a totally different thing.
Yep.
but they really hung in there and both of them have really done a great job. It's I know from my standpoint, I certainly appreciate it.
Yeah, he is. I mean, he's just I just like I like both of them. And they, like I said, they complement one another because they have different styles. But I love the how easy I think it is to talk to them. They're just real easy.
Both
down
very
to earth.
Yep, absolutely.
Right. Yeah.
Well, and they're not. Listen, both of those guys will admit that there's law enforcement's not perfect. They're human beings too, and mistakes happen.
Yep. For sure.
It's just
Paris.
when mistakes happen when people try to play the PR game too much, which I think's happened some in this case. That's unfortunate.
So everybody that's in the chat right now that doesn't know who Skip Jansen is, Skip was somebody that I met over on Reddit well over a year. Well, it's been well over a year ago, a year and a half almost now.
God, it seems like it's been a lot longer than that.
I know it does, doesn't it though? But yeah, I think it was like September of 2021 is when I met you over on Reddit. And Skip was pretty well known around Reddit at that point in time because he had been on True Crime Garage with the Delphi case and a theory that he had about that case. It kind of blew up around him and people started talking about his quote unquote theory and POI and all of that. And there was a lot of negativity around it. There was a lot of positive as well. But that's kind of where Skip came from. But as far as Delphi goes, and there's a lot of people that I trust that deal with Delphi, such as Fig Solves. Everybody knows and loves Fig. Perry. They all listen to what Skip has to say and the theories that Skip comes up with. He is a great critical thinker. He has a lot of good ideas that he brings to the investigatory process in this case. He's easy to talk to. He's easy to get people to talk to him. So I think it's one of the things that he's good at when he's investigating is talking to locals, talking to people who know things. And he got a lot of good information. And so Perry's fine, Dave. He's kind of laying a little bit low, just kind of watching the Delphi scenario. He got really burned out with all the infighting that was going on in True Crime and the Delphi case, and all of the nasty stuff that was being done between creators. And so he just decided that he didn't want to be a part of that. So he's just kind of been laying low. But that's my introduction. Now, Skip, if you want to say more about yourself, you are more than welcome.
No, I appreciate you saying everything you said. That was very nice. Well, I feel like I have a lot to live up to now. Hope everybody's not disappointed.
Yeah, no, it's
but no, I've been lucky. I really have. I've met a lot of really nice people. A lot of people who had great information, and I've been fortunate that they've trusted me with information, and so I feel like it was there's so much involved in this, and there's so from like you mentioned Perry and this, it's so, like I said, it's so different. He deals from a standpoint of everybody in law enforcement has a common goal. They want to get it. In this, not everybody does. There's people out there who have other interests than seeing a resolution to the case or seeing someone be held accountable. And I think that gets frustrating. I think it's frustrating for all of us, because we all get tied up, get kind of interwoven and tied up in it. And so I think I certainly understand his frustration.
Oh yeah, it's for sure. I see my good buddy Steve is here. He's backstage, but I'm going to give him a minute to catch his breath and to get everything situated, because I want to thank you. I want to make sure that he's okay with everything, and he's got his coffee and he's had a chance to wet his whistle, because it takes a minute after you've sat and talked for a couple of hours to just jump right in and start talking again. But yeah, I'm going to bring him on with us, and everybody say hello to Steve and just give him a minute to catch
There he
his
is.
breath. Hey
Steve.
there, Guy. How are you?
Oh, it is an honor to be here tonight. I had a show and got that taken care of, and I've been looking forward to this all day.
Awesome. I always love having you. You know that. And I was up late with you last night. You had a late nighter, buddy. I was really surprised when I got my notification that you were on. I was like, man, this is late for him, but I'm glad I caught it, and I got to see the rest of the replay this morning. So
Well,
great
thank you.
show, as always.
Just going out there, I've been requested by other people that were in different parts of the country that, they couldn't see the shows due to work schedules and things. And I said, well, we'll look at this. And we did. And that was my first show trying to emulate and imitate what you do. And I'm not as skilled at what you do. You handle the chat remarkably well, and it's going to take me years to get to your level.
You are so kind. Well, I just think it's cute that Mrs. Steve didn't stay up to be up late with you then. She was like, no, that's a little late for me.
Yeah. And I wanted to speak to Skip. I've seen a lot of your information, and I respect you, and looking forward to tonight.
I am too. I have a lot of people, some mutual friends of ours speak very highly of you, and I've been looking forward to this for sure.
Well, good.
Yep, I think it'll be a really great show. Like I said, you guys are people that I hold in the utmost respect. I just do. I know that you are honest and you put out facts. You're all about the case and helping and not hurting the case. And that's what I'm all about. So, I kind of keep my family close and small. I've learned my lesson being in this genre and being on Reddit and everything, and Skip can speak to that. You got to be careful of who you get close to, but I tell you what, you guys are the real deal.
Thank you. It's quite an honor for you to be on that list of people that you trust, and that means a lot.
Yep, I definitely do.
I will probably have more questions for you than anybody. I'm real interested in procedural things, and just why law enforcement does things certain ways, and I think a lot of us are because there's everybody has rules and regulations in this realm. It's not so much, you kind of say what you want, and I think it's good to hear the nuts and bolts and things and how they really work.
Well, I came into law enforcement. I'm a second generation law enforcement officer. My father started back in the 60s, and I watched his career progress from the late 60s through the 70s. And we got a little feedback here. Is that me?
Do you have
No.
YouTube? Do you have YouTube open?
No, I have nothing.
Okay,
But,
just make sure. If you do, you need to.
I turned the volume down to make sure that's not what giving me a little bit of feedback.
Usually that's what happens to me, is I end up having a YouTube open somewhere.
So I turned that down, so maybe I won't get much feedback. But anyway, as a second generation law enforcement officer, and understanding how law enforcement was trained, and that to be a police officer in the state of Georgia back in the 60s, you didn't even have to have any type of formal training. All you had to do is go, and the police chief says, "Hey, you want a badge?" And that's all it was. And then they started coming in and having some type of structured courses and instruction for law enforcement. And of course, when I came in, everybody had to be certified and meet the state certification to be a peace officer with background checks and training, and meet that standardized training across what they believe was the best practices for law enforcement to behave. And so, I got to see that transition from the 60s, 70s, 80s. And then when my career started in 85, I saw the transition from officers that had never had any type of formal training in the processing of crime scenes. And it was, it was three-ring circuses, some of those crime scenes pre-CSI. And I've got to saw the improvements. And now there's still mistakes made, absolutely. And law enforcement still has a long way to go. I'll not defend law enforcement. There's not room for improvement. There is.
Well, the thing about it is, you're talking about a time period where people solved cases and investigations run off of hunches. If you tried to do that now, people would go crazy. Technology has changed investigative stuff so much. With the DNA and all everything all the testing that can be done.
You're absolutely correct. There was a higher rate of crimes being solved during pre-CSI for the fact that people trusted law enforcement back then, and juries felt that when you went to court and a police officer pointed his finger at you, you were guilty.
Right.
And if an eyewitness pointed their finger at you, you were guilty. It didn't matter. All they had to do, and were there people that lost their lives and lost all freedom? Yes, absolutely. And we have to judge it for what it is now. That you can't compare the way crimes were solved in the 50s or 70s and 80s, as late as 80s and prior. You can't judge that because law enforcement was under a different level of respect. And we should still respect law enforcement, but we should also hold them to a higher degree and a higher standard because the technology is there. Don't send someone to prison because you're lazy. Send them because you have the proof and the evidence.
Yeah, that was one of the things I was going to ask you about, is that, the technology's gotten so much better, but the threshold and the standard and bar has gotten so much higher for where you got to get to get a prosecution. Is it made it harder in that aspect? I know technology's helped, and if you got the killer's DNA or whatever, but the threshold that you have is higher, and the standard's much higher, for juries to convict somebody.
Well, yeah, and it's a two-edged sword that you have more technology, but there's certain things about that you should be able to. That you're hunting people that are critical thinkers, that go out there and look at something and able to evaluate not just what you see on the surface, but why did that occur? Who could possibly be responsible for this? And sometimes it's not your best educated person that can do that. Sometimes you take this old redneck country farmer, and they'll have great insight into personalities and understand things that other people won't. And but there's a lot of people that do have that formal education, and nothing against them. They're extremely well educated, and I have members in my family that are off the charts, and I have a brother that's been in school since 1961, still in school. He's just one of those people that he's an engineer, and he'll be a student until the day he dies. He's just of that cloth. That's what he wants to do, is build his mind and the base of his mind day after day after day. And and he had a great career. But there's other people that should law enforcement get that everyone has to have a degree. I think that we'll suffer because, like I said, just because you have certain certifications and certain training doesn't mean that you're the smartest person out there or
Right.
have the best instincts.
Yeah, I think a lot of people, think that law enforcement should just come into every situation with no bias, and the fact of the matter is you're still human beings. I mean, everyone brings their own life experiences, value system, and sensibilities to whatever case they're looking into, and so there can be assumptions that are made based on your experience and what and I think people don't understand that. Oh well, that's just the reality of it, because you're human.
Oh yeah, mistakes are made. We have Delphi that everybody looks at, and they said a lot of mistakes were made, and I agree with that. And then we look at what happened in Idaho, and we saw absolute 180 degrees of the same group of agents, as far as state level, federal level, and local level coming together and able to identify the individual. One case they were unable to. So you have absolute polls on both sides of the spectrum in these two recent cases of arrests made within just months of each other. And
I wanted to say something about that because, I've been saying a lot for months about how, and actually longer than that, because even when I was just over on Reddit, but when, in Delphi, people have vilified the police, for almost 6 years, they have just been thrown under the bus that they didn't know what was going on. They didn't know what what was happening in the case and all of this other stuff. And I get it. We've all talked about it. When there's a lack of information coming to us from law enforcement, that vacuum is going to be filled with something. So people start filling that vacuum with their own ideas, their own thoughts, and what's going on. It started to happen in Idaho. If you guys remember, just a couple of weeks ago, they were saying on social media that this was becoming a cold case, which I thought was absolutely ridiculous. It hadn't even begun to really be investigated in my eyes. And come to find out today, once we get the PCA released, that they had him in their sights on the 29th of November. The 29th of November. And I mean, they started, that is so quick. And I agree with you, Steve, that all things came together with those jurisdictions. They worked together as a team, and it came, it came to fruition, and it looks like they've got a pretty solid case against this guy, just from the stuff I saw today. And we know that prosecutors don't put everything in the PCA that they have. So they've got a lot more than what they're showing us. Yeah. And, but yeah, I can't say enough about what the police officers in Idaho have done, but I think we can definitely talk about some of the stuff with Delphi and how it may not have been the same cohesive kind of communication between these agencies. I think it's apparent. Yep. And I think Steve has got something to talk to us about tonight on that very topic.
I do.
Or not Steve, I'm sorry, Skip. I apologize.
Yeah, one of the things that we don't look at from our perspective, or not many people do, is that we pick up the case, the day we hear about it. And if you thought it from day one, you pick it up on February the 13th, 2017. But there could be a lot of stuff going on prior to that date that affected how an investigation was handled. I don't want to say too much, but we've been working on something that basically entails the first 5 months of the investigation and leads up to the Old Bridge Guy sketch being released. And I think there were some things that were, what's the best way to put this? Maybe there were some disagreements. Maybe there were some, because everybody walks up on a crime scene and they see how brutal a murder is, and they think they have things in their mind. Where the crime happened, again, people have their own sensibilities when they bring to the case, and So in a multi-task force situation like this, I don't think it would be uncommon if people, disagree. I think that's probably, but at some point you have to get, it has to kind of be going down the same path. And I think up until that point happened, when we release all this in time, I think it's going to become kind of apparent what happened. And the very first part of the case is so important, because that's when the bulk of the tips are coming in. That's when you're interviewing all the witnesses. And if that's what I don't want to say anybody there's mistakes been made. People have given law enforcement enough grief on this, right? And I don't think anybody did anything intentionally. Maybe there was just some difference of opinions and whatnot. But yeah, I think when we get it out there, it's going to be interesting for people to see.
Well, I can tell you about difference of opinion. That's a very polite way to say it, because I can tell you what goes on behind the scenes sometimes, and I've been there. That I've seen them almost that you get in these arguments and in these confrontations, because you're dealing with law enforcement officers, and some of them, each of them, and like I said, you look at a scene, and certain things may stand out to you, and someone may come up with one of the most ridiculous possibilities, and you look at them and you're alpha and you say, that's the dumbest thing I ever heard in my life. what made you think of that? And sometimes they have, and it should be done that way. You have to have the debate of what is that person and what would drive that person to that conclusion. And sometimes they win you over, sometimes they don't. And but you'll see people make mistakes. They'll, I saw it a lot where someone says that, well, if we call so-and-so, we'll be able to get to this point of the investigation we need to quick. And I said, nope, if you do that, you're going to get burnt. And more times than not, when you bring in someone that tries to cut shortcuts, that it harms the investigation.
Hey, Perry, it's so good to see you here. Perry says, I think all of law enforcement has been aware of major mistakes in the Delphi case, and no agency wants to make similar mistakes.
And that is a man that we cannot argue with. I highly respect, and he is the man that we should all base upon. He is a man of reason.
He certainly is.
Everybody nowadays wants to always look for blame. We're always saying, hey, whose fault is it?
Mm-hmm.
I don't look at it that way. I think there were probably good reasons that one POI was looked at by one agency, another one's looking at, and again, it goes back to things that might have been happening prior to the crime. Okay. I mean, you look at ISP, they had a guy who was the self-proclaimed, wanted to be worst cyber criminal in the world, who had been taunting them for 3 years and talking about how he was slitting girls' throats. He was they couldn't find out who this guy was, right? For 3 years. And the frustration level I know had to be huge. And so you walk up on a crime scene and you see 2 little girls murdered in the exact same way this guy has been talking about what he's going to do to little girls in Indiana. Your mind immediately goes to, good chance it's that guy, he's been for 3 years, he's been talking about cutting 13, 14-year-old girls' throats and carving their private parts and things like that. So I don't blame law enforcement. I don't blame the other agencies if they thought the guy who owned the property the girls were found. That's the guy you should want to talk to first. And the guy comes and the guy's asking for an alibi. And, what the hell?
That's a red flag right there.
Yeah. Even if he's innocent, he's acting guilty. And maybe he knew that they were going to look at him, and maybe he had some things that he didn't want them to find, and so he was trying to, but he certainly didn't do himself any favors. So you got one group thinking, hey, this is, and obviously we've seen by search warrants and things like that who the interest has been in, and no, right, who's been dealing with a cyber terrorist for 3 years. Like I said, I don't blame them. I'm not looking to blame anybody, but at some point there has to be okay, we moved. This hasn't gone anywhere. We've moved on, and that's kind of what this project we're doing on is the first 5 months of the investigation about how that was. Everybody thinks the 2019 press conference was the really change. The change happened the real big change happened in July of 2017. That's when an arrest was made on somebody they were looking at really hard, and the other guy went to jail for drinking a beer. So that's again, I'm not looking to blame anybody, but that's the only part I haven't liked about it is I haven't liked the PR campaign. I haven't liked the always looking for a reason. It's like the article I sent you, Chris, that was floated a week after the murders about the Indiana Children Against Internet Crimes group. Floats an article out there about how they're underfunded a week after the stop. That's, and I understand that if that's what you think happened and but that's all you're trying to, it's like a built-in excuse. It's like, but I don't think people want to hear that. They want to see, hey, we don't want to hear why you hadn't arrested this guy prior, and the bad part was the guy I'm talking about is a guy named Buster Hernandez. Okay. And for anybody who doesn't know him, he is the guy who was basically terrorizing Indiana. He was threatening bomb threats to different cities and schools and malls and all that kind of stuff. And he was basically taunting the ISP, and he did it for 3 years, and they couldn't figure out who he was. They couldn't penetrate his VPN and had no idea who he was. And so again, he was, when that was I guess whoever. Everybody asked why there was such a heavy group of law enforcement that showed up early in the case. I mean, almost immediately. There's your reason.
Yeah, because they had been honing in on this Hernandez guy for 3 years, and they knew of him. They knew what he was capable of, the things that he was threatening, and all the stuff that he was doing. And then when they found Abby and Libby the way they did, I think it led them right away to think, oh my gosh, we've got this guy that's finally done it.
Right. And the thing about it is, how, for everybody out there who doesn't know, how he ended up getting caught was he was doing all of these threats on Facebook. Facebook paid over $100,000 to create a software where they could get his IP address and find out who he was. Well, in June of 2017, 4 months after the murders, they gave the FBI the software. FBI got him to download it. They figured out he was in California. Had never stepped foot in Indiana. They went and arrested him. 3 weeks later, they released the first sketch.
Yeah, once they realized it wasn't him, and that this guy is not our guy, that's what led them on down the other paths. Although I do still believe that the FBI thought Ron Logan was definitely their guy.
A lot of them still do.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, well, that's true. They're still posting about it, right?
Yeah, well, like I said, I mean, it's he did a lot of stuff that was weird.
Right.
Weird.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
If he's not guilty, he sure as hell acted guilty. I mean, would that be a red flag for you, Steve? Guy who trying to drum up an alibi,
And I can't explain it to this day.
Yeah, he still wonders about it.
I had always believed that possibly he went and located the girls that night, and I thought that was possibly that. Here they are, and that's why. But once I visited and went to that location and saw how hostile getting out of there in the middle of the night with no lights would be, I realize that more than likely that's not the case. And I have no idea why he created or asked to, but it still is a red flag to me that that would be something that I could never argue against anyone that said, well, logically, is he psychic? No. Why
Right.
would he do that? Was it
Right.
because he was drinking? You know, I've
Who
never
knows?
in my life had anyone, and I've done thousands of interviews with thousands of suspects. I've never had one get an alibi for driving.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And that's what, everybody kept saying, well, he knew that he'd been driving he'd been drinking, he'd been out at the bar, he broke his probation. He didn't want to go back to jail. And that may very well be, but I still am with you, Steve. I think it feels kind of odd, and I have always felt that way. But then we feel that same way, you and I, about the Kleins, with all of the searches that were done in Vegas. That is so much of a red flag. Who does that? Who goes out and Googles how long DNA lasts on a body?
Prosecution has a hard road to travel.
Yeah.
In cases you investigated, Steve, did you have a lot of coincidences? This case seems to have just a ton. It's like every corner you turn, it's like, this guy was asking about DNA. How long does DNA last? And this guy's asking for an alibi and going to the fish store. And what?
Yeah.
It's weird.
No, I'm a poker player. I'm a blackjack player. I count cards.
Yeah.
Mathematically, at what point does it say no?
Right.
And just like with DNA, it's mathematics.
Yep.
It says that it's one and whatever, and we accept those numbers. When is it the same for the coincidences?
I didn't know you were a poker player.
Oh, I love it.
I play poker.
I've actually done quite well in the world.
I play poker every Friday night. Huh? You should come up on a Friday night and play with our poker group.
Poker is nothing but an interview. Every bet you make is asking a question.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. Very cool. Very cool. For everybody in the chat, anybody who has questions for Skip or Steve, I will star those, and we will, at the end of the show, we'll go through the questions. Okay? So don't feel like you won't get them answered. It's just easier.
Now, Skip, yes. I know you. I had never heard that story about the individual they first thought before the release of the sketch. Now, are you along with the Richard Allen? Are you along with that there's others involved? Is there a connection with the Kleins? Where do you stand on this? Because right now I have no idea.
I am, be honest with you, I don't know that anything would necessarily surprise me. If they said that Ron Logan was somehow involved in this as well, it wouldn't surprise me. If they said, one of the Kleins or both, that wouldn't surprise me. So normally I never have thought really that it was more than one person. I always thought that the way this went down, it being in a public area and all that kind of stuff, there probably just wasn't a bunch of people milling around. But God, there seems like there was a lot of people. The one thing about Klein and how the Buster Hernandez thing kind of connects there a little bit is I think it shows that ISP was
just a cat.
Thought there was a cyber component to this crime all along, and he was doing the exact same thing Hernandez was doing. He was procuring and distributing his photos through Dropbox. He was catfish. They were almost identical, just on a different scale. So I think the ISP always, I think they always thought there was a cyber aspect to it, and so I think that's probably the commonality there. But no, nothing would surprise. I don't think the Kleins are involved. I think they are. If somebody showed me that they could put them there, that's always been kind of my issue with it. Is 40 miles isn't close enough to be in there to, for me to, you know, say that I think that somebody, the guy, I always thought it had to be somebody either that knew was on the trails that day or somebody who lived very close. So, but again, it's another one of those things. It looks suspicious as hell, and obviously ISP had a lot of interest in him, and
I agree with you. But if they bring up that, and if it is true, we right now, how much do we trust murder sheets or the Daily Mail out of UK? But but if they bring up that the clients actually looked up that service station on the same day of the marathon, I think that's a game changer.
Oh, there's no doubt. Yeah.
But we don't have verification of that yet. Sometime in discovery we will, if that's true, and because that's where I draw the line at coincidences.
Yeah.
Of course, you may have someone that's catfishing the girls that communicates with them that morning, and so if you have a potential victim of being catfished by one offender, you may have another offender that's catfishing them also that we are not aware of.
Right. Exactly.
And may have access or may have spoke to them, because banks get robbed every day, but they're not robbed by the same individuals every day.
That's right.
One bank can be robbed just because of its location and by different offenders. And so we have to look at the victims in the same way and build that victimology. And so, but at some point, and it's highly, like I said, a red flag for me that the clients were mentioned in the transcripts of speaking. He never denied it, but
Right.
We've never had where the marathon has been absolutely confirmed. If that gets confirmed, I think that will be a game changer.
Yeah, I don't. Again, I'll go back to blame again. There seemed to be a lot of blame going on from the group you mentioned, the podcast group, and it was all seemed to be kind of pointed at the FBI. I'm not sure really what that was about, but hey, they lost the videotape. They did this wrong. They did that. I'm not saying that their source was somebody ISP, and that was again, I'm gonna mention the PR thing because I think we've seen a good bit of that. Unfortunately, one thing that's happened in this case a lot is there's been stories have gotten interwoven because there's so much out there. One of the very first warrants that was executed was at the Maxwell House, Bicycle Road, and Bicycle Beach Road.
Bicycle Road.
Yeah, they were. How that came about was he was seen at a gas station wearing clothes similar to what was BG was seen on video, and then of course the story changed into it was the son and it was and all that, which was wrong. But I'm just wondering if part of that was if that's one of those deals where the stories got interwoven. Kind of like the law enforcement asking for information about the hitchhiker and the guy in the broken down truck. Those two things got interwoven. They're two different stories, but they became one. And I'm kind of curious, maybe if that's what that was from. I don't know, but I agree with you. If they could put it, if they can verify that, then yeah, that shows intent. That shows he had every intention of being there.
Yeah.
Right.
And I did a show on comparing Logan, Kleins, and Richard Allen, that if you give me three suspects, two of them creates alibis, and one of them says, I have no alibi, I was there.
Right.
I'm looking at the two that have alibis first.
Yeah. Exactly.
For sure. Yeah. No, exactly.
I'm looking at the other one as a potential witness. Can you help me do a sketch? And what participation did he? We go by the information that he says he saw no one else other than the three girls. And that's all he saw on the trail, which may come back to haunt him, that from his wanting to interject himself,
right.
will lead to his conviction if he's the one that's solely responsible. But I'm looking forward to the hearings that are about to, and the discoveries are coming in the near future.
I appreciate you saying that, because that gives a lot of insight about what the mindset of someone in law enforcement would be, and the timing of him getting interviewed. If he came forward really early when law enforcement is seeking witnesses, law enforcement wants witnesses, and so of course, yeah, like you said, they're going to say, hey, yeah, well, who'd you see? Are you a witness? And so they're going to treat him like that early on until something changes. The fact that the conservation officer and how that again, it's another kind of blame thing that FBI apparently can't even enter data anymore, but according to some people. But he fills out a lead sheet, gives it to the multi-task force group. I mean, that seems like a pretty simple thing, I mean, everybody's saying, well, why would you do it with the fish, game warden, fishing? Well, they were trying to have as much help as they had. They were overwhelmed early on, and they got conservation officers are real police officers. They can make arrests, they can do all that. He may not be a skilled interviewer exactly, but he passed. If he got the information, filled out the lead sheet and passed it along, then that's really all he's supposed to do. And I see a lot of people blaming them, and I don't get that.
Well, and I see a lot of disconnects, over the years, and he may have just been overwhelmed, and I'm talking about the conservation officer. We don't know how many people were assigned the task of going out and interviewing. Was he on his first interview for the day when he spoke to Richard Allen that day, or was he on his 50th, or was he on, and did he do another 50 that day? We just don't know what the interactions were and how many over his course. Now, if he only took during his following up on these leads, if he only did 10 interviews and then he missed all the other press conferences and talking about the conservation officer, and he missed all the data and the questions about, does anyone know someone that parked here that day? And numbers mean things. And
well, let me ask you this. Walk me through this. He does that. I know this is big, and there's 3 different agencies that are involved, and there's somebody who's trying to coordinate all this. And if it doesn't get coordinated perfectly, then things can fall through the cracks. But does the conservation officer then follow up again and ask, hey, did you ever talk to the guy or does like you said, he's not watching press? I mean, is he thinking, hey, is he making an assumption that, hey, they probably interviewed him and nothing came of it? So how would that all go down?
It went through it fell through the cracks. We know for a fact for 5.5 years.
Yeah.
What led to that? And it may be exactly what you said, that everyone's taken for granted that the others followed up, and no one double checked. We didn't have a database or creating a list of, okay, guys, on this board or in this file, every name of any individual that says I was on that trail that day, they go in this file. And how many people said they were on that trail that day?
Yeah.
And we knew of every individual that was on the trail that day, right, in our world of YouTubers other than Richard Allen.
Exactly. It's funny you bring that up, because he comes forward apparently really early, a day or two after. So, but does he ever mention that to anybody? I mean, the guy at the bar where he wouldn't shop, they say he talked about the case all the time. He never said, hey man, it's crazy, I was out there that day actually. Yeah. Does his wife never say one to her friends, Rick was out there? Does his daughter never say, oh yeah, my dad was out there? I mean, doesn't that seem kind of a little odd?
I brought that up several times and spoke about that. And you're exactly right, that they're going to look at that. They're going to look at it. Okay, you're there in one of the biggest days that ever occurred in the city of Delphi, and one of the most horrendous crimes that could ever occur to the most vulnerable people that could occur to, children. And you never spoke of it for 6 years.
Yeah.
And
you talked to people about the case, but you never said you were there.
Yeah. And that, his attorney says that he was trying to help the case, and maybe absolutely true. But I've never spoke to anyone that saw a train wreck that didn't say, "Hey, guess what I saw an hour ago?
Right.
Train wreck or a plane crash, or I was there," and that's going to be key.
Well, and like I said, that the guy at the bar said that he liked to engage and talk about the case. Somebody who was there, who's innocent, would say, "Hey, yeah, I was out there, man. It's crazy. I can't believe that." It's but nobody's ever said, at least nobody's ever said that he ever brought that up.
Yeah, I mean, the day after that on the bridge and saw the picture, and are we to believe that in those 5.5 years that he never saw a news picture of BG on the bridge? And he says, and he never came forward. I think it would have been great on the 2019 news press that if he stood up and said, "Hey, I was on the bridge that day wearing very similar clothing, and I didn't see the girls."
Yeah, because if you remember, right, when they first put the still image of him out there in 2017, in those first few days after they had it from the phone, Doug Carter said, this is a person of interest that we want to talk to, that may have information pertinent to this investigation. They didn't say this is our suspect when they first put the photograph of him out there. They just said it was someone they wanted to speak with. So you would have thought at that moment in time, had he been out there doing nothing nefarious, he would have immediately walked across the street, to the sheriff's office and said, "Hey, Tobe, I was out there that day, and I was seen, I think, by whoever. I was wearing similar clothes, but I don't have anything to do with this."
Yeah. And look here, there was even something mentioned about nobody coming forward in the affidavit. I think it was the Ron Logan one where it said, "Hey, the guy who's seen on the bridge, nobody has come forward and claimed it's him." So, the assumption being, if that person's innocent, they would have come forward. I don't know that that's 100%, correct assumption to make, but it's certainly likely, So, yeah, I wonder if when he came forward, he obviously knew he was seen and all that. Would he? I mean, is that the only reason he? Is that the same? Is that the reason the crime scene was staged? Because obviously Ron Logan would have a reason to stage a crime scene to make it look something different. It's on his property. Klein would have a reason to stage a crime scene because he was talking to him on the phone that morning. This guy was seen. I mean, is that it? I mean, that's the reason you make it look like it's something it's not.
I think that it speaks to his psychology and what mental illness or mental issue we're dealing with here. If he's a psychopath who just was out there to fulfill a fantasy, he may very well have just staged a crime scene to keep law enforcement from looking at him, because he may have known he was seen. Who knows? I just think that we won't know that until we see more information. But I think he staged the crime scene to confuse law enforcement.
I go off a little bit different. I look at it from the point that we're dealing with a psychopath. You're dealing with an individual that was able to kill 2 children and then go back to his normal way of life and never let anyone know. And be able that they can't tell the difference pre-crime versus post-crime.
Right.
That he behaves the exact same. He's happy. He's jovial. That this is, it meant nothing to him. He has no feelings of regret or
remorse.
And whatever staging occurred or posing, because we really don't know that. We're looking at FBI agents that, if it is Richard Allen, that not only were wrong about who the offender was, but they embellished a search warrant and come up with information that took them down the wrong path. And some of them are still going down that path. right or wrong, we don't know yet, haven't had a trial, but that he staged that due to whatever fantasy he had or posed them the victims, his interactions that day. I do believe that when he told them down the hill, the location where they were found murdered was probably not the location he had in mind of taking them. I think that was something that was forced, because who in their right mind decides that we're going to wade a 40-degree creek to do whatever type of fantasy he has? And that's one thing that's drove myself, and whenever I speak with Faxx, and we've discussed this, that drives me absolutely crazy.
Yeah.
When he tells them down the hill, where is he going?
Right.
He put a huge obstacle in his way or in his path on purpose if he did choose to take them across the creek. And that is just not normal, I don't think, for a killer or someone committing this type of crime to do. They want to do it easy, quick, and with as little of hassle. And yeah, in the middle of winter, when the temperature outside is where it's at, and you've got frozen ice cold water, you're not going to want to do that. You're not going to want to risk it.
No, and that's always drove me crazy, and that's always been an outlier. I don't know. And when I went there and I looked at it, I said, "Man, that makes no sense to me."
It didn't make it when I didn't make any sense to me either.
Yeah, Steve, you both have been there. You and Skip both. And what's interesting, Skip went at the end of May, first part of June, and he really honed in on the deer path, which is right there at that north end of the bridge, as being the escape route of Bridge Guy at the time. And he and I did a show about it, and how it was such a perfect get out of there kind of way from doing that. And you were there at night and you did the studies on your, talked about it on your show, and almost fell backwards going up those hills. How do you
That's the closest I've come to get hurt in a long time.
I am so glad and thankful that didn't happen to you. But what do you think about that now that it was Richard Allen, now that somebody saw him walking down the 300, muddy and bloody? Where do you think he came out at?
I believe that at no point did he want to be that, at the end of this day and at the end of this encounter, I want to walk down the side of the road muddy and bloody.
Okay.
At no point did that enter his mind, that when we went down that hill, we was going somewhere that he had absolute total control. And those two children absolutely destroyed his plans and messed up his whole day, and was led to from the time that they took the picture of him, it was going downhill.
Yeah.
He had lost control at that moment. He didn't realize it. And he was so fortunate that the FBI, because I don't believe that there's anyone else on that bridge that day, and that picture is going to be of Richard Allen. That's who I believe it is.
I agree with you.
When I did the timeline and I saw that last witness, and when we have the timeline of when she says she was there at the bridge, saw him on the first platform, there's not enough time for anyone else to be coming in and out. And if there was, why wouldn't Richard Allen say, "Hey, I saw Ron Logan walking across the bridge. Or I saw him on the other side of the bridge." There's not enough time. And for him to come back where you have one witness that says, "Oh, I met the girls and they were walking towards him and he missed them." And how is that possible? And I just don't, it doesn't make, and when stories don't make sense, just as in poker, you make that call.
Agree. The path, the first thing I noticed about it, and my first thought was, how were the girls not there? Look, this path goes right. There's a path, literally a path 25 feet from the north side of the bridge, where the bridge starts, that goes right down to where the girls were found. No going through any thicket, a path. There's 4 ways you can access that place where the girls were found. You can cemetery, Ron Logan's property, across the creek, or the path. The path is the easiest of the 4 by far, but we're supposed to believe that the first people that saw or tried to access the area came from the creek. That doesn't make any sense. How were they not? I know it was dark, but that's even more reason to go down a path, if you're looking. And I know there were some hills and all that, but we made it down there. I was with Julie, and we made it down there in about 10 minutes. And we had the one little drainage area was the only area you'd have to skip over. And I just can't. The path is right off the trail. They knew they were on the trail. How did that not get searched?
Yeah. Well, once it gets dark, I can tell you about land navigation at night. It's extremely dangerous and harsh, and I can see why people would want to restrict on that side. We're looking for missing children that more than likely law enforcement and even maybe some of the searchers were thinking, oh, they're at someone's house. The phone is pinging all over town, or possibly my phone did for whatever reason. Absolutely drove me crazy that I would move 10 feet, check my signal, and I'd be 300 yards away from where I was 30 feet ago. It just didn't make sense to me. And it still doesn't make sense to me. But that's for people that understand it greater than I. But so I could see why after dark they weren't found. And I've heard stories of why it was daylight. Certain people just turned the wrong direction. That it was so close that when the first family, I believe it was Kelsey and who was the boy that crossed the bridge first, and they said that they saw the slide pattern going down the hill, but they turned the other way.
Oh, Cody, Cody and Kelsey are the ones who crossed the bridge together. And
they just made that. I think that if they turned left, they would have found them. Yeah, I think they went the other way.
Yeah, another observation I made was I was standing there looking at it. I was like, the only thing we had that told us they went across the bridge was the photo, right, and video. Yes. At that point, they didn't have it.
No.
So what? If they hadn't taken it, no one would have ever known that they crossed that bridge. That was the thing that I was kind of like, I understand they were looking, and that maybe that's an easier side to look and all that kind of stuff. But everybody knew they were on the north side. They're off they were on the trail. Nobody knew they were on the bridge. And so for me, it just was like you said, when things don't make sense, I'm kind of like, you got 4 ways to access this one area, and this is the easiest, but it wasn't taken. Yep. Pat Brown asked Ron Logan if they could search his land. I don't know if they did or not. They didn't find them. It's just, I don't know. Maybe it is just the circumstance that it just, like you said, it was dark and it was hard to navigate, and they just didn't walk right up on them, and maybe that's what needed to happen. But man,
I can tell you about human nature and darkness at night. I'm an old country boy raised in the dark, and I love working night shift.
Raised in the dark, were you?
Oh, absolutely. Times, but anyway, I work night shift, and I love night. I'm a creature of the night. If you give me a choice of being out in daytime or night, I take night. Just enjoyed it my whole life. Fish otherwise. I love fishing at night, but you could outrun me on most. I'm a big old fella, and every foot pursuit I ever got in daylight, I would probably outrun 50% of the time. Every foot pursuit, someone tried to outrun me at night, I caught 98% of the time.
Yeah,
that's awesome.
Because people do not want to go into the dark.
Yeah, you're right.
Yeah.
especially when the officer says, keep going.
Yeah.
Yeah. Get
Do you
yourself
want me
back
to
in there
shoot
real
you?
good. Yeah.
Stop, or do you want me to shoot you?
And it's just that way. A lot of people, plus at night sound carries so well that even if they had a big lead on me, you just stop and you can hear them for forever. And then you go up there and flush them out. And but it's just absolutely amazing that the majority of people fear the dark. I do not.
I've heard people say that, well, they didn't think they were heard or all that. My response to that is, well, it was going below freezing that night. So there should have been some. Look, I know there was urgency. They were trying to find them, but I don't think that the attitude. Well, we thought we didn't think they were hurt. Maybe they went off, but still, they're 13, 14-year-old out there, and it's going down to 20 degrees tonight. I mean,
I think that was why Anna and Becky both. I mean, Anna, in her interview that night, realizes it's dark, it's cold. Libby was afraid of the dark. She knew that, and that, and I think when that set into her, when she realized that this is more than them just being out there lost or whatever. They, I think she realized it was far worse at that point, because of the circumstance. The girls would not have stayed out there like that. And it's always bothered me too, Skip, and you know that, about the fact that they didn't find them, and that it seemed as if that side of the creek between Ron Logan's property, the cemetery, and that north end of the bridge, that side of the creek didn't get searched. And I don't know if it did or not, but it just seems that way, because it's like, how could they not have found them?
After dark, I have firsthand knowledge. I know exactly after dark why they weren't found on that side. Now, I went in there, and you can ask Purdue RN. I didn't take a flashlight. I had no lighting whatsoever, and I went in there to experience the exact no light land navigation that you could do, as low light as possible. And it was cloudy or whatever. There was no moon, and I could not see my feet. That's how dark it was.
Yeah.
And you were not afraid?
No.
God.
I mean, what to be afraid of? What's going to be out there?
You don't buy the Ron Logan that it was lit up like a football stadium or whatever his quote was that night.
Now, when the crime scene team was there, absolutely, but not the night that they. Now, certain parts of it, when they were looking, probably over there on the roadway where the cars were driving up, maybe to the Weber household, or in places that humans are easily able to navigate fields, flatlands, but not on those ridges. No, not down in there. That wasn't lit up.
Steve, Miss Purdue RN says Mr. Steve was a machine in the dark on the property. Unbelievable and no fear.
Well, the only fear I had was when I almost fell backwards. I said, they'll never get me out of here.
Yeah, I will say I went down there, at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, so it was a little bit different, But
a little bit different.
Yeah, I would. I mean, unless I had like a really high beam flashlight or something, at night it would have been a little tricky for sure.
I just think it would be spooky, and there's so much you can trip and fall over. I just can't imagine. And you're like, well, why would you be afraid? What's going to happen out there? Well, you don't know what's going to happen out there. You know why you were out there. You were out there looking for somebody who committed this crime. You don't know what's going to happen in those dark, deep woods.
Well, I mean, the worst thing is that, and I've experienced in my life that, yes, I've been out searching for people in the middle of the dark and run across them in absolute darkness, and finding them, and knowing that, okay, you're up to no good. I'm doing my job. I'm reported to come out here and look for a suspicious person in the dark, and you're here. This isn't a normal thing for you to be here. And so it was easy to, and Mrs. Steve told me later, she said, well, what was you going to do if there was someone down there at the crime scene? Well, He wasn't supposed to be there.
Well, I'm glad it was you and not me. I wouldn't have handled it well at night.
Look, I think it's a good perspective that you did that night. And did the perspective of the area and the whole thing change for you a good bit when you went? It did for me.
It did, absolutely.
Yeah.
Boots on the ground changed my opinion of it so much.
Me too.
And still has. And the biggest mystery is down that hill. Now, Mrs. Steve got extremely upset with me when I was trying to cross the bridge, and she wouldn't want me to. And so, of course, we've been together so long that we're going to be together for many, many more years. So I had to make a decision, didn't cross the bridge. But from your experience on that side of the bridge, what is the most likely place he was trying to take the children?
Yeah, somebody just asked, I think it may have been, I don't know. The question got asked, do you think they could have been on the south side and did the turnaround? And I never thought that was possible until I went. I never even really considered that he was over there, and I don't know what he would have been doing over there prior to them coming on the bridge, because that's private property, and there's really nothing over there to get to. But after seeing it, knowing that picture exists, 7 minutes or whatever, I timed it. It took me 5.5 minutes to get one side to the other. The timing for him not to be in that picture is extraordinary. I mean, it has to be. I mean, there. I don't know if you noticed that little path that we've been talking about. There's a little plateau that sits off there that gives you a perfect vista from the north side all the way across the south side of the bridge. And I'm wondering if that's where he was, and that's why he wasn't in the picture, but was able to access the bridge so quickly.
I think it's very possible. And the reason I say that, Skip, do you remember the interview with Kim Riley, when he was, or not Kim Riley, I apologize, with Dave Burston, when he was at the press conference, and he was describing how when you're looking at your television or when you're looking at your camera or whatever, you can only see this. You don't see what's over here, and you don't see what's over here. I think they have footage of him over here.
You think he's up? You think he's already up there?
I think he's up there. That's just my opinion. I mean, I don't understand why else he would have said that unless there's somebody else. And I always wondered about that when he was making, and if you remember, we cut that and broke that whole news conference or press conference down. And if you look at Jerry Holman's expression on that stage, when he's talking about that, his eyes got huge and he's like, what's he doing? What's he doing? Don't talk about that. Yeah. You can kind of see it on his face. He's given too much away. Don't go there.
Yeah, I really haven't. I haven't totally reconciled that whole thing. I could go either way. That could have been came from the north side, but he was already up there. He came to the south side and did the turnaround. I don't really know. I've always kind of thought he came from the north side, but that picture and the timing of it and all that kind of stuff certainly is. Man, he would have. I mean, the timing for him of not being in that photo. Unless they took it, unless he was in it, and they got in somehow they photoshopped it or whatever for whatever reason. But yeah, I don't know. It could go either way for me.
I think he could have came up from the south side and walked past them, and then turned around and headed back towards them, and that's when she was like, "What?" She knew something was really wrong.
Yeah. Do you think if they saw him at the end of the bridge on the south side, do you think they would have gone across? Maybe like you said, maybe he was down the hill and came back up or whatever.
No,
I'm gonna go get another cup of coffee. I'll be right back.
Okay, that's fine, Steve. I think he was out of sight. I do not think that he was there, that they could have seen him. I don't think that Libby would have gone across the bridge. I just don't think she would have. She was too smart. And
an etiquette thing there too. You know, that if somebody was over there and might possibly be coming back, that you didn't, you know, so you wouldn't have to pass each other.
Yep. I think she took the picture of Abby, and as soon as she took the last picture of Abby, I think he came up onto the bridge at that point.
Yeah, I could see it going either way. I don't have a problem with either.
I mean, obviously, we could be all, you know, all of us could have it wrong. I mean, but that's how I kind of in my mind see it happening. Rather than him coming from the north side, although, you know, he could very easily have been hidden on that deer path where you stood in those trees in your video that I showed on my live.
That would be a perfect place
you know,
to watch, you know, whoever you were wanting to watch, and not and stay invisible. I don't know. I don't know that it's a huge thing, because I think they're both sides of it have some merit, but we know. Look, we know he came from the north side, but we also know he was out on that platform, at the first platform at one time. So was that just him starting across? You know,
right?
Or do we think he went back? Like, you know, the one witness who came saw him, and then she turned around and left. Did he go back on the north side, or did he just continue walking across? You know.
Yeah, I don't know. Hey, Candy Lady, good to see you. Yeah, Dave, I understand. We don't have all of the factual evidence yet. We don't have everything that the prosecution has in this case, and they may not have included that in the PCA for a reason. Obviously, I think if you followed Idaho at all today, and you heard anything about the PCA, it was 19 pages long. The Richard Allen PCA was not 19 pages long. And it was, when you compare the two of them, there is just so much that I think could have been in Richard Allen's PCA that they just did not include and have not included.
Yeah. I was going to ask Steve about, if you're in an investigation and you make an arrest on somebody, it wasn't a caught in the act, but it was, you know, based on what we know, it was pretty close. I mean, he was arrested not long after they discovered him. How much pressure do you feel to get all that more evidence going forward to get before the trial happens?
Oh, they have to get a lot of ducks in the row. It absolutely will be, and there is a lot of pressure because we have two uphill battles that if we can't link the Kleins to this, or if we can't link Ron Logan to this, we have that third party defense. And so that's huge that they got to get all the ducks in a row. But as far as the girls on the bridge, this is my theory. Y'all were talking about that. This is what I think, as far as looking at from a law enforcement perspective, of being someone who has set up ambushes to trap criminals, allowing them to come into a point of where we can apprehend them. There's no difference. It's victims, suspects. You let people enter in, or as you try to find a certain type of victim. Looking at it from the perspective that Richard Allen went that day prepared to commit a crime. We have edged weapons, we have firearms, and we may have other things. We may have restraints. Don't know yet. But anyway, I believe he was on that first platform when the female says that she came and saw a man on the first platform. She turns around and starts walking, and she meets the two girls. I think she is very much just like what we saw in the Idaho case, a very lucky non-victim. I think that Richard Allen began following her. And I think he also met Libby and Abby, and he continued to follow the female that went back to her car and left.
Interesting.
And I think that at that point, once he sees that woman was able to get in her car and leave, he knows, oh, I still have another potential victim, two of them behind me. No one else is here.
Yeah.
And he turns around, and by the time he gets there, I believe Libby and Abby have already crossed that bridge, and they're on the other side.
That's a good point, because if I saw two girls that age in a area like that, I would probably think maybe there was an adult that was going to be coming behind them or something.
Yep.
And like you said, that gave him enough time to follow and see that wasn't his original target wasn't good. So he circles back and says, well, obviously there's no adult with these two teenage girls. Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. But that's why I would look at it, and he already knows that, oh, okay. And so he gets back, and for the miracles of him being out of the photos, I think that first lady was so lucky, and that she was able to get to her car before he was able to do whatever. Plus, at that point, he had two other witnesses.
And at that point, that makes kind of sense, because if you recall, supposedly when the families listened to the tape, or to the video, not the tape, sorry, to the video, when they showed it to them, there was something said by the girls about, is that creepy guy still behind us, or is whatever, something to the effect of that, is what Anna, Abby's mom, said. And if that is all true, then that would explain why, because they saw him.
They passed each other. Yeah.
They passed each other, and they felt he was creepy.
Yeah, and but that's just my 2 cents of looking at it and seeing how criminals have approached houses, predators. I've seen it on stakeouts dozens of times.
One thing that's always set with me is that I've always felt like he had to know there was not anybody below, right? I mean, you wouldn't take two people up there, having them with a gun, so already the kidnapping factor is already in play into a blind area like that. I mean, but he had been out there long enough and standing there looking at fish or whatever. He would have known. That always had to
looking at fish from 70 feet above. Wow.
What's your definition of fish is, and what is his definition of fish?
Yeah,
and looking at.
Yeah, maybe that's why he went to the conservation officer. But that was always the thing. That had to make sense to me in terms of it had to be somebody who knew there wasn't anybody below. So it had to be somebody who came up from below, or somebody who had been there long enough to realize that there wasn't anybody who came behind them. So I think that's a great point, Steve. I really do. I think that makes a ton of sense.
Well, like I said, it's just, that would be the argument I would make. I'm not saying that is absolute. I could be 100% wrong, because at the end of the day, we know he's on the other side of the bridge. He didn't. I mean, when did he say down the hill?
But what's the chance of him maybe not being? See, that's what I've been thinking, you guys. After the probable cause came out, stop and think about this. We know that she did see him, and she did a video of him on the bridge. But what if he did not take them down the south end side of the bridge? What if he took them back across the bridge and down the hill that Skip found?
Well, the only argument we have about that is it true in the rumor mill about muddy footprints that we have tracks, and where are the tracks, and were they muddy and bloody? There has to be something that caused him to get muddy, if we believe the witness on the road, and it falls in line with crossing the creek.
Okay.
Yep. That and the fact that the timing of the length of the video or audio.
Yeah.
Like I said, it took me 5.5 minutes to get across. Yeah. So I mean, 43 seconds. I don't know how exactly the phone was turned on, off, recording, not. None of us know any of that. We just have heard it's 43 seconds long. That's the one thing that's kept me from believing that possibly they walked back across the bridge and down the hill.
Yeah, and that's the one thing that's always drove me crazy is down the hill. Where were we going?
Yeah.
Yeah, and I'll always I can't wait to find out.
Yeah, I can't either, because I'm just like, that doesn't make any sense to me either. Although I've heard that, if you were going to assault somebody that side of the hill, there's a ridge there it's a really high bank up to the private drive. There's a big drop that drops down to the creek. So it would kind of shield you if you took them up against that, and you were going to plan on doing it there. I think Gray Hughes still believes that, or said that that's where he thought they were going. And it's a big grassy area with trees and stuff, and it's not open, but I mean, you would be undercover. Nobody from the houses would be able to see you because that's such a deep, steep drop right there. So maybe that's where. There's also a shack, believe it or not, some sort of a shack in those woods. If you keep walking and going, because Anthony Greeno got drone footage of it when he was out there. So there is a shack out that way, and I know that we're going back to all those crazy rabbit holes where people were talking about shacks and stuff, but I mean,
Well, I watched the shack last week again.
What'd you think of it?
I actually talked to a professional. Actually, it's going to be on my show Saturday about that. I'm having a clinical psychologist that's retired. We're going to be talking about the Idaho, but I had asked her about watching the shack and seeing what it meant to them and why they would bring that into the behavioral questioning, and what could that mean? Because there were certain things within the shack, from him having a gun in his pocket,
Yep.
to standing and walking across the water and looking down at the fish.
Yep.
And I thought that, that's amazing. But that movie came out after the abduction.
Yeah.
But the book was published prior to, and it was just odd. And I know, but what was the reasoning? And I believe that there was something in the crime scene that was non-secular, that they were trying to link up with that individual, that has something to do with, and that was just happened to be the movie that was close to the crime scene, that addressed several issues. And I believe there is something within that crime scene that's non-secular. I don't think that Ives was speaking out of school.
I don't either.
I don't either. No,
And
I don't think he was
said,
either.
There's been some controversy, but did he actually say it? I think everybody knows he said it. I mean, I know it's been taken out and you can't find it, but I agree. I think there was I don't know about I'd like to know more about this guy and his religious beliefs and his and things like that. But I agree with you. I think there could have been something. There definitely could be something that, it could be. You think the posing could be part of the non-secular? What kind of item would he leave that would be? You certainly could pose somebody to make it look like that.
Hey, GonZo, so good to see you, my dear.
The easiest non-secular thing that you can do to a victim is place a cross on them.
Yeah. And
there's plenty of limbs and debris. Was it intentional or not? I don't know. Or did he leave? Did he actually leave a signature? We just don't know what was driving this psychopath to this end. And like I said, it's so fascinating. I wish I had worked on the case. I absolutely do.
I wish you had too, because I don't think it would have taken 5 years. Now, I'm just putting that out there. Because, I said that about Perry as well. If you both had been on this case, man.
Well, it depends if they'd given us the all the people that were there that day. And that's the biggest thing that, just like they mentioned in the chat here about why was GBI looked at it. You could have all the agencies in the world look at this case, but if you don't give them all the information and you don't give them everyone that was on the bridge that day that we know about, they're not getting the full picture.
Absolutely.
And,
I mean, not knowing who all was there that day is just mind-boggling.
Yeah.
I mean, it's unbelievable.
And yeah, I mean, and he came out of nowhere.
Nowhere, yeah.
And if he had been talking about it in town, I think someone would have heard about him.
See, that was my point about what I was asking about it earlier. See, he comes forward, but he apparently doesn't say another word. Neither does his family, ever.
I don't necessarily think, okay, this is my take. I don't think that he necessarily told his family that he was at the bridge that day. I think he may have gone to the conservation officer and hoped, that he could tell him what he told him and see where it went. And when he found out that it went nowhere, nobody came to talk to him. Nobody came to get him. Nobody knocked on his door. Nobody came to work. And the more he kept watching he was like, good Lord, I'm not on the radar.
Yeah. And
so he decided at that point in time, I'm just going to act like I'm not on the radar. So he didn't talk about it.
We know what the rumor mill in town would have been, because we have a search warrant executed at Ron Logan's. We have them saying that 15 people have come forward and said that's Ron Logan. Yep. We have that we know within the rumor mill of the community whoever one at that point thought it was. And did that assist? I believe that's helped in so many ways of letting us slip between the cracks, and it took 5.5 years.
Well, that's the thing. I mean, you've got a town of 2,800 people, and I've never seen a case with that many. Well, I don't want to call them POIs, but in the sleuth world, there were hundreds of POIs, and the guy who ends up doing it was never mentioned. Nobody ever knew about him. I mean, that's just nuts.
It is.
I had a POI, and it wasn't Richard Allen. And no one. 70,000 tips, you guys. 70,000 tips in a case in a town with 2,800 people. What does that tell you?
Yeah, that they were, like Steve was saying. I mean, there were so many people they were looking at. There would have been no reason. There's no reason this guy would have been.
I don't think the public understands it. They don't even have that many tips in the John Benet Ramsey case, you guys.
Exactly.
All these years later, they don't even have that many tips.
It's crazy, isn't it?
It is. And everybody and their brother was tipping people in on this case. I mean,
the first guy who came forward.
Yeah.
That's just unreal. I mean,
it goes back to the Green River Killer, Steve. Remember, they talked to him early on in their investigation.
Yeah, he had a witness that saw his girlfriend in that vehicle.
Exactly. Yeah. Yes. And they let him go.
Same thing. Witnesses said when they saw the picture on the desk, they said, "Well, that's Ted." And they called and asked what was the color of the Volkswagen. And due to someone's that said that beige and whatever color it wasn't it. And they wrote it off just due to that. There's a color difference of, well, my beige is just like everybody else's beige.
Yeah. Well, it went on so long, and there were so many tips, there were so many people following the case that all the theories got out there, and everything was, it was a conspiracy. It was ritualistic. It was everybody might, when there's no arrest, everybody's minds go to strange places. And first guy who came forward.
And here's what Purdue was talking about, that 40 caliber bullet. No one ever knew of an unspent casing, unspent bullet.
Yep.
And I can understand why. Now, I've always suspected and still believe that gun is seen somewhere on that video. We just don't have the edition of it.
Yes, we do not have privy to that.
We don't have the special edition of it.
We
don't. I believe that gun is seen and is identified.
You think it was visually, or maybe it was heard that when he pulled it out, or
I think it's on the video. I honestly do. I believe it is. There's a shadow. I was a sniper. I was trained to identify guns from shadows, and there's a shadow. And,
where is the jacket? Pants?
no, it's on the pants.
Pants. I never tried to make too much of the video just because it was, I mean,
it was dissected a lot, that's for sure.
Well, I didn't see any of that. I saw a guy wearing a blue jacket and some blue jeans.
That's what I saw.
Absolutely, and I as far as that conspiracy, that is there anything done to the video? I have never in my life heard in any case anything been sent to Disney World.
Yeah. Exactly.
Other than this case.
Unless you, of course, win the Super Bowl and then you go to Disney World.
Yeah, it makes no sense to me.
Yeah,
and I know what Disney World does, and so that's as far as I'll ever go into conspiracy is that why would you include, and I can't argue against that. There is, it just drives me crazy, this case, that what steps they took, I just don't understand them.
Yeah, I wonder how much do you think the crime scene confused them in terms of, or maybe that was part of the disagreement that I know crime scenes can be read differently based on what people see and what their experiences are in the past, but you think it confused them?
Oh, absolutely. You're going to have people, and I sat there one time on a next to a body next to a pool. And one time, and I stood there for 30, 45 minutes and trying to figure out this blood pattern. And I was dumbfounded. And this dirt road deputy walked by, and I said, "What do you think caused that?" And the deputy said, this, and that. And I looked, and I said, "Dang." I didn't tell him that. I said, "That's interesting. How do you come to that conclusion?" He said, "It happened the same thing to me one time. I tried to jump the diving board, tripped, and busted my nose."
Yeah.
And he survived. This guy didn't.
No, but that's a great example of people having different experiences in the past that then they come to different conclusions.
Yeah. And, it was accidental death, but still, it never occurred to me of why we had this blood pattern beside the pool. And, I was looking at trying to figure out what type of assault and made sense. And we didn't have anything else better to go with. And it checked every box that we had that day. And I just
thank you so much, Truffles, for your membership. I certainly appreciate it. We all appreciate it here at the doors behind the crime door.
Let me ask you this, Steve. Is that one of the things when you're investigating, is that one of the things you're trying to get to, you have all these questions. Are you trying to check the boxes that answers those questions?
When you have the boxes of what the evidence are.
Right.
And you have to determine what caused this. And, and there can be a lot of different things that cause the house to catch on fire. It can be anything from arson to poor wiring to lightning. And so you have to what evidence, that if there's not a lightning storm at the time, then we can write off lightning. And so now we got to determine, is it arson? Is it some type of electrical or some type of accidental fire inside the house? And that's what it is. You just a process of elimination and whatever it leads you to and what's most likely.
Yeah.
And, but yes, you have to check that the evidence leads you to, you can't create the narrative to satisfy the evidence.
Right.
And you shouldn't. Now, a lot of people do. But the evidence speaks for itself, and it should lead you to the truth. You just can't create stuff to fill the voids.
Steve, Purdue RN asked a question. Can't they run reports for registered 40 cals in Delphi?
I don't know if Indiana, I don't know what all the firearm laws are there, and could they have, and so I don't know if that, now, should they have checked the registry for all gun owners that are, yes, and I believe they would have. and they fell through the crack once again, because in my little checklist, if I had a 40 caliber bullet unspent at a crime scene within 2 foot of a body, I would go and say, okay, who are the registered licensed gun owners that are permitted to carry a firearm? Because I think that at that time it wasn't constitutional carry. And so you would have that list of individuals. And then I'd look at my list of who was on the bridge that day. And now we've got, oh, this person owns firearms. And then, you start putting people on a short list. And the one person that would have been on that list would have been Richard Allen, who says that I was on the bridge that day and who says I own firearms.
I like the way you do your lists.
Yeah, that checks too. Well, we know, that the homeowner or the son of the homeowner that lives in the house right across, that looks right down the street, had the same gun.
Oh, yeah.
And they searched his place, took his gun. So, obviously there were some people, his it didn't match the cartridge, but so they were looking,
Yeah.
why they never, like you said, why they never put it with this guy who's there. One guy has an alibi of a timesheet because he was at work. He couldn't have been on the bridge. Other guy admits he was, but you were searching the guy who had it. Well, I'm not getting into that. But
We had all the probable cause in the world. All you had to do is go to the judge and say, Judge, we have a guy that's that looks, or they didn't ask the question at the time, what were you wearing?
Yeah, exactly.
And if they had asked, what would the answer have been? And we probably didn't have the picture at that time either when he first came forward, or they would have given it to him and say, is this you? And so I don't think that he was known. A lot of people saying that they knew exactly who he was from the early days. I don't believe they knew who he was until
I
the
don't
last
think so either.
60 days.
Well, I think what Tobe said about, how they had this one got past me or whatever he said, that's pretty obvious they didn't know.
Because they would have done a search warrant.
Exactly.
It's easy to get a search warrant.
Yeah, exactly.
You give me a guy that says, hey, I was on the bridge that day and I didn't see the girls, but I've got another witness that says that these other 3 witnesses, a total, I think about 5 or 6, that puts him there on the bridge that day, and he says that he sees everyone else. And you have one witness that says, yes, I saw him on the bridge, and I also saw the girls within a few hundred feet of him. And he says, no, you have all the reason in the world to do a search warrant and get a probable, put that in your probable cause affidavit. That wasn't done. They didn't know he existed. It was lost.
I think that was kind of it in a nutshell, because you're talking about 3 witnesses see a guy coming toward coming on the trails, right? Well, the FBI, I believe it was Ron Logan. That obviously wasn't Ron Logan they saw. That would have been pretty. They could have, they would have known that. So where did those disconnects happen between witness sightings and POIs? I mean, at some point you have to the evidence has to meet up with the suspect, right? Well, if one group's thinking, well, this is the guy because these witnesses saw him. Well, the other group's saying, no, we know it's Ron Logan because he wouldn't have been on the trails because he just walked up the hill. How does that get where the wires get crossed so bad?
He specifically, this guy is not stupid. I don't believe. I know a lot of people think he is, but I don't think he is. And I think that what he did, he purposefully talked to the lowest totem pole law enforcement officer he could find. And I'm not saying that in a derogatory manner to a conservation officer. I don't want anybody to think I am. But when you stop and think about this case and the fact that they had a task force and we had the FBI in town, we had places for them to go, the command center in town. He worked directly across the street from the sheriff's office. He went to a grocery store and ran into a conservation officer there and told him that he was there that day. He did that on purpose because he was hoping to fly under their radar. I believe that.
Well, he accomplished it.
Yeah.
Now, I'm not saying that should have happened, that should have happened, but you can see kind of how it would happen, especially if he just played it down. Like, I just wanted you to know that, hey, I was out there. I didn't see anybody, didn't see the girls, didn't see anything. And the guy's like, okay, well, thank you. And took down his name and his phone number or whatever. And that just got into some witness file about a guy who was there and his name and phone number.
Yeah, see,
I know Steve's laughing at me. Come on,
No,
tell me
no,
what
I'm
I'm
not.
wrong.
No, that's
No, I'm laughing at the chat where they're saying, "Show me the tentacles."
Oh.
that's actually kind of the perfect storm situation where he talks to somebody who's not active in the investigative part of the multitask group. He's just interviews people and passing the information along.
Yeah.
But at some point, and I wonder if the timing, I want to say how Steve feels about this, the timing of him, if he had come forward a week later and they had more information and they saw that the deception part of this crime about he deceived the girls, he tried to stage the crime scene, showed deception there. Wouldn't it have made sense that he was trying to deceive law enforcement by coming forward, placing himself there? That's part of the deception. And I mean, so if he comes forward a week later, would it have made a difference?
I think it was a perfect storm.
Yep.
And if we go by what the defense says, that he called in wanting to help, and that he set up and the luck of the draw, and it's a perfect storm. It could be, I don't know, or it could be like that he had contacted law enforcement, and before the proper individual was going to interview him, he ran across the conservation officer and said, "Oh, I mean, there's several different ways that, hey, I'm supposed to meet somebody this evening. Do you mind if I give you the information?" There's so many different ways it could have gone through.
Yep.
But regardless, he seized upon the moment that when Ron Logan was identified and the community accepted that Ron Logan is involved, because there's people within the community to this day believes that is the case.
Yeah. Well, I think the small town aspect of it played a pretty big role. There were probably some assumptions. Oh yeah, that's Rick from CBS. CBS guy, I see him all the time. And look, that kind of stuff happens. I mean, it does.
For sure.
This
is the guy who gave out their drugs. I mean, not their drugs, but their prescriptions. Right. And I mean, he was somebody they trusted.
Brutal. Yeah, you see a really brutal crime scene, and your mind just doesn't want to take you to, hey, it's the guy I deal with at CVS all the time.
Right, Rick at the CVS, who's always helpful and
look,
always.
Law enforcement was in there. That's probably where McClellan buys his hair product.
Well, we have to look at, you're in a small town. I know you keep saying 2,800, and is that actually pretty close to what it is? I don't know.
The population?
Yes.
Yeah. 20. Okay. It's just under 3,000. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I think
under
it's
3,000 people.
29 something, but yeah.
Okay, so we're around 3,000 people, and we got 2,000. We got 2 of the 3,000 people that's alcoholics. You got Richard Allen and Ron Logan. Were they ever in the same store together? Were they ever?
Yeah.
Or were they ever at the same bar or the same restaurant drinking? Is that going to come up at some point, that they have some type of knowledge of each other within a small town? Everyone knows everybody in a small town, and so it's not going to be shocking to me that they never at some point shared the same restaurant or same bar.
Oh yeah, you've seen just how this has gone on the internet about how easy it is to connect. Yeah, that guy's related to them by marriage, and they have 2 kids. Yeah, that's easy to do. Yeah. So yeah, that'll be another thing they have to deal with.
My worst nightmare is that if it comes back on the of the 15 people, it says that's Ron Logan, if Richard Allen's one of them.
I mean,
where he identified the person in the photograph Or is the
Yes.
video as saying it's that's Ron Logan?
That later, yeah. Oh, I know Ron.
Yeah, I mean, if you murder somebody, you know whose property you left them on. I mean, that's the thing is, yeah, it was the middle of the woods, but it was also his private. He knows who lived there. I mean, lives there. So,
And how unlucky can you be that the property you own, you dress up in the same clothing that's on the rich guy?
I know. There's people that believe he did that on purpose. Now, anything's possible. There's people that say he doesn't dress like that normally. And that could very well be. I mean, he may have scoped the place out. He knew who Ron Logan was. He knew how Ron Logan dressed. I've said before, if somebody wanted to frame Ron Logan, he would have been an easy target because of where the girls were found, his history, and everything. But who knows? I mean, we got to wait to find all that stuff out because there are tentacles.
yeah,
And we've been told that there are.
I do have one question for Steve about something at the crime scene. How long would it take to get a knife wound expert's report on a crime?
Well, I mean, just as soon as you get the medical examiners, and when they're doing the autopsy, they're going to tell you a lot about that weapon and from what type of injuries, and if there's secondary injuries, they'll be able to tell you the width, the depth, the thickness. There's a lot of things about knives that if it's used in a certain manner and of what it is. So they'll know pretty well, within hours, a lot about the weapon used.
Oh, yeah.
And I know there were rumors that law enforcement was asking about who's, what gut hook knives were sold. And it's a pretty common knife in rural areas because the hunting knife, but or dressing knife, but it was pretty so they knew about it pretty soon. Well,
it's just like with Idaho. I mean, when you leave the knife sheath at the crime scene,
yeah.
I mean, and I don't find that weird because I found billfolds of burglar suspects at burglaries, and people make mistakes, and those are the easy ones.
Yeah, and everybody thought this guy in Idaho was, because he was held the degrees in criminology and all that kind of stuff, that he was smart.
Well, he was. But just because you're intelligent doesn't mean that you always do smart things.
Yeah, intelligence and smart do different things.
Maria and I was talking about this the other day. Just because you're highly book smart doesn't mean you have any common sense.
Right, and I mean, and even in criminology, you're not taught. This is not like the how to what's that show, How to Commit a Murder or whatever, How to Get Away with Murder.
Yes.
I mean, there's a lot of classes that are statistics and things and all that kind of stuff. I'm sure he's pretty well versed in all that.
Right. He may not know anything about a crime scene. He may have taken criminology courses, obviously, but he still may not be well versed in a crime scene.
Yeah, somebody like Steve and law enforcement would be a lot. That would be somebody who would know because he would know exactly what they would be looking for. But somebody who just studied criminology is.
Yep.
Now I get he's going for his PhD, so he's got to have some smarts. I mean,
I'm not saying he's not intelligent, but he's not the practical sense of it.
He made a lot of mistakes for somebody who is at his level. Let's put it that way.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, if I was looking for someone to interview regarding criminals and knew his background, I'd ask him, hey, what does this mean? I mean, he's that far into his schooling. I mean, he's 28 years old. He had to dedicate a large portion of his life to be educated and trained in that field that he was, whichever way he was going to run with it, which evidently turns out that if he is the one responsible, he was going to go along the path of a serial offender, and which will be a lot of movies made of.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I think he's going to be studied for a long time. I think this guy has really shown some cunning, bold. He reminds me so much of BTK, just in a short amount of time of what we know about him. He is very cocky, I think. It seems like he just didn't think anybody was going to catch him.
Delusional's really the term.
Yeah, I mean,
Well, I've always said that my worst nightmare will be the super predators, the ones that are educated and not driven by fantasies. The ones that are driven by fantasies were always messed up.
Exactly.
And you will be able to track them due to their signatures.
Right. Because you can find some commonalities. That's the ones that everything's random, and because they know how to beat the system. But with this guy, I mean, there had to be some selection. I mean, in design to this. I mean, how did he know? Who was the connection? Who was he following, stalking, whatever he was doing? Because I doubt. I mean, it doesn't. I mean, 4 people and one of them being a male. That seems like a risky proposition.
Yeah, well, just like with Delphi here, same thing. We got 2. We walk a trail and we see all these witnesses that see us, and we continue along our path and using the things that we brought that day to commit a crime.
Yep.
And follow through on it.
Bold, just very bold and very narcissistic, and thinking I'm smarter than law enforcement. They're not going to catch me. And sadly with Richard Allen, if he turns out to be Rich Guy and the killer, which I highly think they have enough to get him on. I feel that way. But if it does turn out that way, he was on his way to getting away with it, you guys. It's been a long time.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Sometimes, though, the narcissism overrides their ass. It's like I made that comment the other day on Reddit about there's a case in Texas where the similarity to Delphi was there was an unspent cartridge found, and the technology of the markings and all that was used in that case. And what happened was a judge was fired because he stole some computer equipment, and his revenge was he killed the assistant DA and then killed the DA and his wife. But he, you would think, the judge, they're not, he's not somebody you'd automatically look at. He probably knows how to, veer away from that kind of stuff. But sometimes their minds just won't allow to,
Steve, I want to ask you one thing. What do you think about the fact that this could have all been a real life case study for him in his in his psychopath mind?
Which one? Who?
Idaho.
Oh, Idaho. Oh, yes. He's in when we went through the training for crime scene tech and went through the additional training as you continue education through the psychological profiling and the different levels we went through over the years, and learning about when individuals, as they start aging, I think the average back then was that the male mind matures at, I think, age 28 average. And I know that's probably true because I met some really mature individuals at 18 and 19 and 20. And I met some individuals in 40 that absolutely was the most immature people I ever met in my life. So I would think that 28 is when you start making those choices for the rest of your life. So he's in the wheelhouse of becoming a serial killer, as we can see. Now, doesn't mean that, and if he is guilty of these crimes, doesn't mean that these are his first ones, but it does lean to the possibility that these first 4 that he probably wasn't planning on 4, it turned out to be 4. But I do believe that he had 1 or 2 on this first offense that he thought that he was going to have to do, and it turned out to be 4.
Sorry, Skip, go ahead.
You brought up crime scene techs. I was told by somebody very reliable, okay, about the Delphi case, that the crime scene techs were instructed to not speak to anybody else in their group when they were collecting evidence or after, and they were told to just focus on their discipline, and that's it. Is that unusual?
Well, and we don't know what context that was. I can see that if you have certain agencies working and we're going to approach and each of the crime scene techs at the end of the day that, okay, we're going to look at them as individual witnesses every day. What did you see? What did it mean to you? I can see where that is actually a pretty good plan. But I can also see the downfall of it, that sometimes, like, you look at something and you say, well, what does that mean? And because it can be very distracting and make you overlook something that, and not collect something that you should collect along with that to prove that.
Yeah.
And so I can see both sides of it.
That was going to be my point. If you find someone else finds something that's corroborating to what you found, wouldn't that be a good thing?
Yeah, and you would never know about it. You'd have it, whereas I gave my information to the conservation officer, and I never.
Does that speak to you in terms of what it tells you about the crime scene? Maybe there was a lot of stuff. It was weird stuff. What?
No, I mean, I was over. Once I was in the initial group of certified crime scene techs. I was in the first class that ever graduated. I think there was like 20. There were 20 something of us that first, and we had to sign off on all subsequent certified people in training. That for them to become certified crime scene techs, they had to work under our direction for a certain amount of hours. And I don't know if that's still the case now, if they've changed the program, but that was way back in the late 80s. And how they handled it and bringing in the FBI, which is, like I told Kristen before, that I won't get on a plane due to my crime scene training. I'm just not going to get on one. Yeah. And we'll talk about that off the air sometime. But so I don't know what has changed now versus what was back then. And I'm almost sure that they don't have the extent that we went in, because they overtrained us. There was things that we did that there's absolutely no way in the world you would ever use it for anything. And which, it did open our eyes up to potential things that you would never run across. But the new technicians and everything and how they train them, I just, I don't know. I've got to look up the courses and see what has changed, because it took me over 2 years, and I spent at least 1 week a year taking training for that certification. And I don't believe that a department will allow or put that much money in one individual anymore, because it was extremely expensive to send me down there, becoming almost a full-time student for almost 2 years.
Okay, guys, I got some questions from our audience.
Sure.
Purdue says, Skip, did you know or ever hear of Richard Allen before the arrest?
No.
I don't think anybody had, did they?
I mean, look, everybody's pretty familiar with what my theory was. Don't you think if I would have known about him, because a lot of the things that the two theories that match up with about coming forward, knowing he was on the trail, I would have been. I'm not saying I would have, known, but he certainly would have been.
You'd have been all over it. Trust me.
Somebody I would have been interested in.
You definitely would have been. As you and I have talked so much over the years about anybody who puts themselves smack dab in the middle of a double homicide crime scene has to be vetted and looked at.
Well, hell, he was there. I mean,
odd.
That's the first place you look. Who was there?
Yeah, who was there? And
let me
why
tell
were
you
they there? And why were
Let me tell you a nightmare of what we had. I had someone sent me an email, and they brought up the point of what about Abby, And I said, okay, let's look at Abby as being the focus. I said, where did she live? And they told me, and they had a suspect that lived in the neighborhood, and they said that he doesn't match the description. I said, well, who in the neighborhood does? And I said, let's go out and do some research and see what crimes are being committed at night in the area in case Abby was the focus. And would you have individuals such as peeping toms in the area? And I have emails of this and of looking in that section of town. And what happened the next week was the transcripts were released, which totally turned it over to that. As law enforcement, I went with the numbers. I turned totally away from Abby, and we turned totally away from looking at additional crimes, because I think Richard Allen, if he is a sexual predator, he has not habits, and he is a creature of the night.
Oh, I imagine so, and especially because of the hours he worked, wouldn't surprise me at all.
Well,
of him being that.
About it too is the focus has always. There's been very little talked about Abby being the main target. It was always Libby. And I don't know the reason for that exactly.
Because they say she got the brunt of his anger, but I'm thinking that could also be because she's the one who thwarted him.
Right. Or he knew he was going to have to apply more pressure because this just from the size standpoint. He knew he could subdue Abby pretty easily.
But I was so frustrated when I pulled up Abby's residence and then looked at Richard Allen's, and he's within the first 10 residences of hers.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
The next question we have is it true that they don't have any record of Ron Logan's obituary, death records, gravesite, or anything?
I don't know.
I haven't heard that.
I know there's still some weird stuff about him. I can't tell a story publicly that I was told by somebody that if you knew about it, you would just be like, holy shit. I mean, it has to do with something that was on computers.
Yeah, I don't know. I haven't heard any of this. This is all new to me today.
There's a lot of stuff out there about him that's weird.
Yeah. Well, I can show you pictures now. Elvis still being alive. So.
There you go. And I can show you. I can actually show you pictures of people waiting in Dallas this past summer for JFK to show up. So, hey.
Yeah. I've seen a movie of Bigfoot. So,
The next question we have is from Little Daisy. So, Skip, do you lean more towards the Richard Allen line wolf theory, where he was a lone wolf?
Lone wolf. Yeah. I would say I lean that. But again, like I mentioned earlier, I wouldn't surprise me if I'm more of the opinion that whoever it is did it on their own. And I don't know why McLeland would put himself in a position where he's almost got to produce somebody now. That seems like a crazy thing to do.
Yeah, it bothered me.
In a bad spot there.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I didn't see anything in that affidavit that I thought was worth doing that to keep it sealed. Did you?
No, absolutely not. No. Considering what was in the affidavit for Brian today, no, I didn't see anything in that affidavit that should have.
Anything that was so bad that you had to bring up, because now, if he doesn't produce, he's creating reasonable doubt, for his own side, by saying, probably there's going to be another arrest.
Yeah. Or that that there's other actors, whatever that means.
Yeah. I mean, just say, hey, listen, we're at the beginning of the investigation. We need a little time. I mean, that's reasonable.
Exactly. John said, big difference in number of tips reported in the Delphi and Moscow, huge number in Delphi. And we did talk about that. So, and he's right. Just incredible amount of tips that came in for this case. It's absolutely crazy.
I don't think they stopped, really, did they? I mean, I know they slowed down but I think they've been getting tips even up until
I think they were getting tips up until the arrest was made on Richard Allen. I think they were still getting tips, according to when they were even at their arresting press conference. I think they said they were still getting tips and to continue to send in tips on this guy. They want everybody, anybody that knows anything or has had anything to do with Richard Allen.
Well, the audio and the video created a lot of that because it gave everybody something to look at that said, oh, that's who it, oh, that sounds like that guy. It looks like that actually has kind of worked against them, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Hopefully that it has in the investigation, at least. Hopefully they'll be able to use some of that in trial. But so everybody everybody became Steve. I'm a law enforcement guy because I can see what the guy looks like and what he said.
Oh yes. Oh yeah. Little Daisy says to Kristen, Steve, and Skip, do any of you believe that bridge guy came from the south side of the bridge, past the girls, and then turned around? And we did discuss that already. So the next question I have is verbal judo. They say bad things come in threes. Question, your thoughts on the lone wolf possibility? I think lone wolf. Steve, what do you think? I wouldn't be surprised if he wasn't.
Before, I always thought down the hill meant something. And I still don't know what it means. But with the witnesses that saw everybody on the trail that day, and having driven there and having gone to the gate that takes you to the residence, to the Weber, until you drive there and you see it. And I always thought that it was at a main intersection, but there's houses down there. And it's wooded, and it's not someplace that you can, it says no trespassing. And when I turned around and had to go back, and so that me and Mrs. Steve didn't have to make bond, and I never realized what it looked like because Google Earth doesn't give you that perspective. And that's when we started realizing that you had to be from that location. You're not from some outsider traveling on what I thought was an interstate, which is not. The Hoosier Heartland is a strange road in of itself. I'll tell you a lot of stories about it.
Strange. I drove about 10 miles and didn't see another car.
They don't even have street signs. I don't know how anybody gets anywhere. But while we were there, I thought, well, we could have someone that would be on that roadway. And but now when the witnesses comes out and he talks about Richard Allen, I consider one of the witnesses because he says he corroborates everything everyone says.
Yep.
And that he's on the bridge that day. And the only one witness that he doesn't corroborate is the one that saw him on the platform. And is that because of the three people that he was targeting, he disassociated himself, that I'm going to target this one woman that seen me on the bridge, begins following her, and then meets his other two potential witnesses, and then victims that it turns out to be. And so I don't think that, that's just the way I think it went down.
Cool.
Yeah, Daisy makes a good point too. Is the way that the GPS and where it takes you. This place, look, this for people who haven't been there, this place is remote. I mean, you wouldn't stumble on this place. There's not a logical or an easy way in to get to go up the little hill to the Freedom Bridge and all that. It's not. You wouldn't. I know a lot of people believe it was somebody random, but once you go there, like Steve said, you realize this was somebody who knew the area very well.
Right.
I had one of the best smartphones in the world. I spent a lot of money for it, and I typed in Moonon High Bridge Trail. I went to Ever City Park and went to and I went to this street or this driveway with on it before I ever found the Freedom Bridge parking lot.
Yeah. You don't just get off Hoosier Heartland Highway and at an exit and just right up to it. I mean, there's when you see 300, I was kind of assuming when I first started following, 300 was kind of a bit that's just a little country road that, hell, the day I was there, I was about 2 miles from Ron Logan's house, and there was an Amish guy in a horse and buggy.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so I mean that's what it is. It's
they have an Amish community there, just a really big one actually.
Yeah,
and but yeah, those are just little country roads, that farmers use. I mean, pretty much.
Visiting totally changed it for me.
The only way I found it was I typed in Delphi Cemetery.
There you go.
I got away from the trails. I said the trails it ain't going to get us there, because I've been to every city park and I can't get there.
And you can't find it.
Yeah, even when you're going, from coming from Delphi on Main Street, you still have to cut off short of and go around. It's just hard to get to.
Not now. I know it like the back of my hand. I mean, I drove it.
Oh yeah, exactly. But
next question is, Steve, why do you think GBI was specifically brought in?
I think it was just peer review, and I know, I work with a lot of those agents. Some of them are extremely brilliant, and even during the back when they were trying to get the psychological profile program up, in addition to the crime scene training program. But like I said, I think they failed due to the fact that they didn't have all the information. They didn't have everyone that was on the bridge that day.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. I mean, everybody would have failed if you didn't know who. I mean, it's like nobody knew it. Nobody knew nobody ever heard of this guy.
If you don't have the right one person, he kept saying we need one piece, and they were really right all along. The one piece they needed to know was who.
Yeah.
Who was on? I mean, we're not talking about that of all the suspects. Let's say that you took every male that was there that day, and how many males was on that trail that day? We know of what, 4 or 5?
Yeah.
All the males.
Yeah.
And so you have your short list of 4 or 5 people that were there, and if Richard Allen's one of them, of you 5, how many of y'all own a 40 caliber gun? Okay.
Yeah.
And we start there.
Do you think
how many of you?
The 19 press conference was based off the profile, 18 to 40 and all that? It does seem very profile-ish, but.
And I can see the age, because on my profile I did have him. I put him at 35.
Yeah.
And the problem with doing profiles and age progression or age estimation, where we talk about the maturity of individuals' minds, he could still be at a age of 35, regardless if he's 50.
Right.
And so, but they did him no favors by saying that he's between 18 and 40.
Yeah.
That's 22 years.
I mean, it doesn't really narrow it down, does it?
No.
Well, and the sketches, I know a lot of people, somehow have it in their mind that those sketches could be the same person and all that kind of stuff. And law enforcement's information hasn't been very clear. It wasn't the same person. It's a combination of the two. I mean, there's just been so much. It's just there's so much ambiguity. It's like, can we clear something up? Can we know who we're looking for?
Like, exactly.
They don't even know who they're looking for because his name's not even on the list. So obviously they couldn't clear it up.
We got 2 more questions, guys. Candy Lady asks, certain people are claiming that Richard Allen is being railroaded by who? ? That would be impossible unless the whole dang town was in on it. Shaking my head. Do you guys feel that he's being railroaded?
Let me put it this way. Railroaded may not be do I feel like there was pressure to make an arrest? Do I think that the timing because of the election is weird? Yeah. I think all that's weird and suspicious. Do I think that guy who you never heard of until 2 weeks before the election or 3 weeks before election, all of a sudden now you arrested him and said, hey, this is 100% the guy? Yeah, that's, again, we're talking about coincidences. I mean, it's like, there's just, if it wasn't strange, it wouldn't be Delphi. You know, everything about this case, it seems like is odd.
If he's being railroaded, Richard Allen's driving the train. He said that he was there, so
Yeah.
he's an active participant in this train wreck. And I'll keep saying that because he says in that second interview that was conducted this year, he says, "Oh, I was wearing those clothes."
I know.
I was on
yeah.
the first platform.
Yeah. I've got a 40 caliber.
I got a 40 caliber gun.
And I may have been wearing a hat that day.
Yeah, exactly.
I can't remember. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean,
Holy crap. The last question we have is from Elaine, and she says, I have a question for Steve, please. Last week on your show about the Delphi murders, I asked you if Rick Allen set up the appointment with the officer or if it was a chance encounter at the grocery store.
Well, I go back to what the press release made by the defense was, is that they are claiming that, and once again, you got the defense making claims. We don't know the final answer until we see the actual documentation of who set up the meeting and who was supposed to do the interview. And if Richard Allen made the phone call and said, "Hey, I was there," and they said, "Well, we're so busy here, we're going to set up an appointment. Where do you want to meet?" And if that's the case, then the defense attorney's saying is correct. And like I explained to you earlier, that there could have been a possibility he had an appointment set up and happened to run across a conservation officer and said, "Hey, I'm supposed to meet one of you guys." And they just took care of it instantly. There's several different ways it could have played out. And the luck of the draw allowed him to slip through the cracks for 5.5 years.
Mindy wants to know, if they uncovered the biggest CSAM ring in Indiana history, why are we not hearing of arrests? We have heard of arrests, a ton of them. I've been covering those arrests for a long time. We were actually tracking them for a while. They were happening very regular. All you have to do is check my case in Indiana, and you can see them. They're coming in right and left.
And even if they just got the one, Keegan Klein off the street, who is an animal, well, I shouldn't even. No, he's just evil. Anyone that says that he's never talked to a child, female, they didn't want to see pictures of, is absolutely unreal.
Yeah,
Pure evil.
Agreed. I mean, that kind of behavior is just. I mean, it's ridiculous. It seems like there's way too much of it in the world too, you know?
Yeah, for sure.
But that's the good thing that's come from whether Klein's involved or not, you know. I thought maybe at one time they were going to kind of hang their hat on that. There was never an arrest in Delphi. Well, yeah, but we got again, when I hear things that I think fall into the public relations part of it, kind of makes me cringe a little bit. But the reality is they've uncovered a lot of bad guys and put them in jail, and that's a good thing.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Like I said, I'm happy they got Keegan Klein off the street.
For sure. And I get that people are still upset that they feel that Tony Klein deserves to have charges against him because of the affidavit or the interrogation. But again, and the affidavit, I guess I should say, because they know that there were more than one person in that house that was talking. But all I can say is give them time. They're not done with the Keegan Klein case yet. And, we still don't know what's going to happen there. So that's all I can say to that. But you guys, we've been here for 2.5 hours, and I absolutely appreciate everything you both put into this show tonight. What a great show.
Well, it's been an honor. Now, Skip, I take it you're from that part of the country?
I live in Florida.
You live in Florida. So you drove all the way up there.
I did. I drove all the way up there on Memorial Day weekend. And I was lucky. Julie and I are friends, so she came out and she was really nice. She came out and met me and showed me around, took me to all the different areas and all that kind of stuff. So that was, but it was a long drive. It was a 12. It was, I mean, yeah.
Well, I'm gonna be heading back up through there. I've got a couple cold cases I gotta go work on. I checked today, and Iowa is still covered in snow.
We got snow again today, Steve. Not much, but we got some.
Does it ever melt off before any time?
Our snow that we got at Christmas had already melted.
Okay. Well, hopefully, because I got to go up there in the next. I'm not going up there until you can see ground.
When are you thinking? When are you thinking of coming? Did you say next week?
First opportunity that there's no snow on the ground. So if you see that it's a good rain comes through and melts all the snow, let me know.
Yeah, it's supposed to be next week, Monday through Thursday. It's supposed to be in the 40s here, which is warm. Which is warm. So.
But I'm looking for at least a week of good weather. I've got a lot to do up there, especially in Evansdale.
I don't see any snow forecasted until Friday the 13th. I wouldn't think that would be a good day to come.
That's good to hear. You're involved in that case, Steve.
We've got several plans of action that we're looking at and trying to get a website up and everything, and so hopefully that'll come to fruition relatively quick. I'm gonna go up there and then like I said, hopefully in the next 3 weeks. And I'd like to get together with Kristen. And I didn't know if you was up there or not, Skip. And if you was, I was going to stop in and have a cup of coffee with you.
That would be nice. If you're ever down in the Panhandle, holler at me.
Oh yeah, we go to Florida once or twice a year. My Mrs. Steve loves Daytona.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Awesome.
But anyway, it's been an honor. And if you ever want me to look at anything when I'm up there, Skip, if you've got any questions about anything, give me a holler. I'll be glad to stop in because I go by and see Purdue, and I need to go by and see Kristen also while I'm up there.
I do actually. I'll get in touch with you and we can talk about that.
That'd be
just
awesome.
TrueCrimeWeb.com is my email. Just
Gotcha.
send me whatever you want.
I'll do it.
It's been an honor. Y'all have a great night, and I've enjoyed it.
Thank you so much, Steve. You get some rest, and thank you for being here.
Yeah,
Honored.
Yeah, I enjoyed it, guys. It was fun.
Thank you. Good night.
Good night. Good night, Skip.
Night.
Thank you, guys. Wow, that flew by. I lost track of time on that one. For everybody that hung out and stayed, I so appreciate it. I know that it's a long time, that's a long movie, so to speak, to sit here for 2.5 hours. But I think that we got a lot of great information. I love having both of them on. They both have great insights. It's such a great conversation. And so I hope everybody got something out of it tonight. Please make sure that you hit the subscribe and the like button. That is the best way you can support my channel. I certainly appreciate all of you, everyone who contributes to the channel, memberships, donations, whatever. I appreciate all of you. I'm excited about what 2023 has to hold for Behind the Crime Door. I have a lot of things in the works of what I'm going to be working on. And so I hope to see all of you, and we will see some great justice this year in the cases that we follow. I hope everyone has a great rest of your evening, a great Friday, and please stay safe, everyone, and make sure that you treat people with kindness. It's the easiest thing to do in the world. Good night, everybody. Thank you for being here.